I wasn't invited to my daughter's wedding, but she still expected me to fund it. At 75, I didn't think I could still be humiliated in heels. But there I was, standing in the gilded ballroom of the Rosemore estate, where the chandelier cost more than my first house in a navy Chanel sheath and the Ferragamo pumps. Eliza picked out herself, holding a gift bag in both hands, like a waiter waiting for a tray. There were no name cards for me, no reserved seat at the long candlelit table, no introduction when the band quieted for speeches, not even a casual mention from the DJ, who announced every cousin-in-law and twice removed sorority sister with a giddy flourish. I had been invited. That's the part that stings. I had received the embossed envelope, the thick ivory card with gold trim, the RSVP with pre-stamped return address, except mine wasn't to the ceremony. It was just to the post-dinner celebration, the after-after, the overflow room of her life. She'd called it a logistical thing. It's small, Mom. Tom's parents are covering most of it, and they want it intimate. But you'll still be there, of course, at the celebration. That's the fun part anyway. I believed her. Because I wanted to. Because she's my daughter. Because somewhere in my mind, I still think love comes with a backstage pass. So I showed up when she told me to. I dressed quietly, arrived early, brought a tasteful gift, antique silver napkin rings from Italy, not too sentimental, not too expensive, just enough to say, I see you without screaming, I paid for this. I walked into the room expecting maybe a small table in the back, a nod during the toast. Instead, I got a folding chair near the dessert cart, wedged between a man I didn't know and a potted fern. Eliza passed me once, laughing in that brittle, breathless way she does when she's being admired. She didn't even pause. Someone asked if I was staff. I smiled, tightly, said nothing. Just adjusted the strap on my heels and took a sip of champagne I didn't want. I don't remember what song was playing when it hit me the moment I realized I wasn't part of the evening. I was decor, background. The kind that can be shifted out of frame if it blocks the view. And the worst part, I'd paid for half the damn view. I stayed through the cake cutting. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how to leave without making it worse. That's the trick of humiliation. When it's wrapped in politeness, you end up thanking people for the bruise. So I sat there, smiling, when I was supposed to clapping, when the toasts got loud, nodding as if I could hear over the music. I even waved once to no one in particular, just to feel my hand moving in the room. My face ached from the effort of holding it still. When Eliza and Tom had their first dance, I felt something tight twist in my chest. Not because I didn't think they looked beautiful. They did. My daughter has always known how to perform beauty. But because I remembered the day she danced on my feet in the kitchen, age 5, giggling while I hummed Sinatra, and we spun slowly near the sink. There was no Sinatra tonight, just a carefully curated playlist of ambient strings and indie wedding folk. The kind that sounds expensive but doesn't remember you afterward. I slipped out after that. No one saw me leave. No one stopped me. The valet didn't look twice when I handed him my ticket. I got into the black Lexus, the one Eliza drives when she visits, but is technically still registered in my name, and pulled out of the circular driveway with the kind of grace that comes from decades of not making a scene. Back home, I stepped out of the shoes before unlocking the door. The tile floor was cold, the kind of cold that travels up your spine without asking. I turned on the kitchen light, just the small lamp near the sink, and set the gift bag on the counter. Still unopened, I didn't take off the dress. I didn't touch the wine I poured. I just stood there for a long time, fingers resting on the marble, staring at the stillness of a house that had once held sleepovers and science projects and prom dress fittings. Now it held silence, thick, aware, and undisturbed. I walked down the hallway and paused at the console table where a photo of Eliza, age 11, smiled from under the glass. She'd been missing her front tooth, wearing a soccer jersey, 3 sizes too big hair in messy braids I'd done myself. She used to say, "My mom is the smartest woman I know." She used to sit in my lap long after she'd grown too big for it. She used to ask about my day not because she understood it, but because she cared that I had one. Now she hosted a wedding I'd funded and edited me out like a smudge on the lens. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, still in that navy dress, and let the silence wrap around me like a second skin. Not sadness exactly, not yet. Something heavier. Something duller, something like realization. I wasn't a guest at my daughter's wedding. I was a line item on the budget, and I'd paid for my own erasure. The morning after the wedding, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that tasted like nothing, and a silence that tasted like truth. I'd barely slept. Not from rage, I wasn't there yet, but from the ache of finally seeing something I'd refused to look at for years. I'd been excluded, yes, but not by accident. Not because there weren't enough seats. It wasn't a clerical error on the caterer's spreadsheet. It was a decision. A branding choice. Because over the years, my daughter had learned to see me not as her origin, but as an obstacle to her narrative, to her aesthetic, to the world she was carefully curating for the people she wanted to impress. And somewhere along the way, I had allowed it. It didn't happen all at once. That's the insidious thing about slow erasure. It asks for your cooperation. One tiny compromise at a time. It started when Eliza was in college. When she came back from her first semester at that sleek, private liberal art school in New England and started correcting the way I pronounced foie gras. When she told me gently that my pantsuits were a bit too DC, circa 1990, and maybe I could try linen instead, I laughed. I didn't push back. I wanted her to feel worldly. Then came the holidays when she asked if we could stop doing formal dinner at home because it just feels performative mom, like a parody of old money. I remember blinking at her over the silver flatware that used to be her favorite to polish. She'd begged to be the one to set the table as a child. Now she called it cringeworthy. Eventually, she stopped inviting me to her fundraising galas, claimed they were super last minute or mostly industry. Never mind that my money was still flowing into the matching gifts. By the time she moved in with Tom, all bespoke beard and Patagonia vests and crypto consulting, I'd been demoted to support role, though no one said it out loud. I was useful, quiet, liquid. They liked me generous and slightly off stage. When she started planning the wedding, I offered what mothers offer: money, contacts, patience, and she took it, all of it, without ever saying she wanted me visible in the picture. And I didn't ask, because asking would have made it real. Now, back at my table, the sunlight cutting across the countertop like a blade, I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial portal, the secure one I used for wire transfers and scheduled gifts. It was time to see, really see what I'd been giving and what I'd been getting back. The spreadsheet took a moment to load, not because it was large, but because I was holding my breath. When the numbers appeared, they were polite. Clean fonts, tidy columns. Nothing dramatic. Just a long, quiet list of how I'd made myself disappear. $18,000 initial payment for the Rosemore estate deposit. $9,250 gift for dress fittings, vintage floral arrangements, and custom calligraphy. $42,000 wire transfer to help Tom bridge the gap while he waited for a new round of funding for his startup and app. I still didn't understand. 3 $400 therapy sessions for Eliza billed discreetly to my card during her quarter-life crisis. $11,800 down payment on a Tesla. They swore they'd refinance in 6 months. That was 2 years ago. There were more. $600 here for pet insurance. $200 there for a couple's retreat in Sedona. Even a $79 monthly subscription for a wine club they never told me they'd linked to my Amex. I scrolled, eyes blurring. Each line was a receipt for the ways I'd tried to stay valuable without being visible, and none of it bought me a chair at the table. I leaned back in my chair, hands resting on the edge of the keyboard, and waited for the usual flood of emotion: anger, guilt, grief. But what came was different. It was still, cold, clear. I wasn't hurt because of what I gave. I was hurt because I gave everything without ever asking what I was being given in return. Respect, number visibility. Certainly not. Love. Perhaps. But if so, it was a version that required my silence. And I'd been complicit. Because somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself that generosity would eventually lead to belonging. That if I was helpful enough, quiet enough, adaptable enough, I'd be invited back into the center of her life. But Eliza didn't want a mother. She wanted an underwriter. And I had been underwriting her reality for so long, I'd forgotten to keep a record of my own. I closed the laptop gently. Then I stood, walked to the mirror in the hallway, and looked at myself. Not the lipstick, not the pearls, not the navy Chanel still hanging by the closet. Just me, the woman who had paid for the orchestra but wasn't allowed to hum. And something inside whispered, not cruelly, not loudly, just firmly, "This stops now." The hardest part wasn't cutting her off. It was realizing I'd never actually been connected. That morning, I stood in front of my closet longer than usual. Not because I didn't know what to wear, I've had the same navy cardigan rotation for years, but because I needed to feel like a woman with purpose. Not a mother, not a donor, just Vivian. I chose the charcoal wool slacks, a pale blouse, and the good loafers I usually save for funerals or fundraisers. I even reached for my old leather handbag, the one with the structured shape and gold hardware, the one Eliza once called, so painfully Reagan era, it might circle back to chic. It still smelled like breath mints and cedar. At the bank, the young man behind the glass partition greeted me with the sunny, over-eager smile that people under 30 reserve for those of us they think might forget our PIN numbers. "Good morning, Mrs. Redmond," he said, peering at his screen. "What can I help you with today?" I smiled back politely, firmly. "I'd like to review all of my automatic payments," I said, "and cancel most of them." He blinked, the smile holding like taffy stretched too far. "Of course." Is everything all right?" "Everything's very clear," I said. He led me to a side room with a glass door and soft chairs. I appreciated that. I've spent too many years having these conversations at kitchen counters and whispered over holiday leftovers. This one needed a desk. He clicked, typed, scrolled. His keyboard clacked like a metronome. Then the printer began whirring behind him, 3 pages single-spaced. I've grouped the outgoing transactions by frequency and destination, he said, placing the printout in front of me. I put on my reading glasses, not the tortoiseshell ones Eliza gave me for Christmas last year. Too flashy, but the simple pair that never pinches. There it was, line by line. Monthly health insurance premium for Eliza's family plan. Pet coverage for a dog I hadn't seen in over a year, $2,000 quarterly for her Roth IRA seed fund. Rent top-up for their second home in Boulder, $134.99, billed to a music school where my granddaughter took cello for 3 months 2 years ago, and neatly tucked at the bottom wedding fund. Reserve transfer $3,000 monthly. I stared at that last one the longest. A fund I'd built in advance at her suggestion, just so we don't have to make awkward money, asks later. She'd called it elegant planning. I called it manipulation. Now. The banker cleared his throat. Would you like to make changes? I looked up at him. I'd like to cancel every item listed here. All of them, he asked gently. All but one. I pointed to a line halfway down the page. Keep the $250 monthly for Margot's college savings. That stays. She's only 12. He nodded, typed. Would you like to notify your daughter of the changes? I almost laughed. I almost said, oh, she'll notice. But instead, I folded my copy of the transactions, neatly tucked it into my handbag, and said, no need. She'll understand. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I walked out of a building not wondering what Eliza would think of me, but wondering what I thought of me. And you know what? I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. The first message came 2 hours later. It was chirpy. Too chirpy. Hi, Mom. Hope you're having a great morning. Quick thing. I think something weird happened with the wedding fund account. The transfer didn't go through. Maybe the bank glitched. No worries. Let me know. I read it once. Then again, as if rereading might make the tone less cheerful, less oblivious. There was no. Are you okay? No, how are you feeling after last night? Not even a thank you for the thousands she'd pulled from that fund for monogrammed linens and imported peonies. Just a glitch, like I was a misbehaving app. I didn't respond. An hour later, a second message came, less sparkly. Mom, this is kind of important. The Boulder rent is due Monday. Tom's tied up with work stuff and we're juggling a lot right now. Can you confirm what's going on? And then the classic fallback, I'm honestly just confused. That word again. Confused. The shield of the modern adult child. Not cruel. Not ungrateful. Just confused. As if forgetting to invite your mother to her own financial legacy is a scheduling issue. I turned off the phone, not out of spite, but because I didn't owe anyone a press release. That afternoon, I sat in my sunroom with a pot of Earl Grey and opened the drawer where I kept my legal files. Not out of anger, though. It hummed faintly in my rib cage, but out of clarity. Inside were folders I hadn't touched in years. Will original draft. Eliza trust notes. Property titles. Lake house. Margot college planning. I flipped to the will. Simple, standard. Almost polite. Eliza would inherit the house, the art collection, the stocks. She was listed as executor. There was even a note in my handwriting, because she'll know what to do. I crossed it out, not with rage, just a ballpoint line smooth and final. Then I made a new note on a yellow legal pad. Call Charles, my lawyer, request meeting. Ask about removing Eliza as executor, explore trust structure for Margot not to be touched until she's 25. Just making the list made my breath feel deeper. I wasn't severing the relationship. I wasn't burning bridges. I was locking the gate to my garden because I'd finally noticed who kept walking in without wiping their feet. Later that evening, the phone buzzed again. This time, it rang. I let it. 1 ring, 2, 5, then voicemail. Eliza's voice came through, polished but quivering at the edges. Mom, I'm not sure why you're being like this. I mean, if something's wrong, you can talk to me. We're family. You've always helped before. I just don't get why you'd shut me out over one night. That's not fair. I feel like I'm being punished for something I didn't even mean to do. Ah, there it was. The invisible clause, I didn't mean to hurt you, so you shouldn't feel hurt. I sat in silence, staring out the window. The garden was still. Just a few late summer roses clinging to their stems. I didn't cry. I didn't text back. Instead, I opened my journal, the one I used to jot recipes, grocery lists, reminders to renew car tags, and wrote a single line. When people teach you how little you matter to them, believe them. But also remember to matter to yourself. Then I underlined it. Twice. The first thing I did was move the mirror. It had hung in the entryway for 20 years, a heavy antique with ornate corners and a gilt frame Eliza once called a bit too Versailles cosplay. I used to laugh when she said things like that, pretend I didn't hear the edge. But that morning, I took it down and leaned it against the wall in my bedroom, where the light hit it soft and warm. I wanted to see myself again, not just when I came and went, but where I lived. Then I walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the fridge, the one where I'd kept the good china, the real silver, the cloth napkins I'd stopped using, because Eliza said they made dinners feel like events. I brought them down, washed them, set the table for one. Roasted a chicken just because I felt like the smell of time in the air. There was no guest coming, no holiday, no occasion, just me, still here. The house felt different when I stopped adjusting it for other people's comfort. I stopped buying Eliza's preferred almond milk, stopped keeping the thermostat at 72 because Tom gets headaches if it's stuffy. Stopped leaving the guest room bed made with the scratchy linen set she picked out because neutral looks better in photos. Instead, I bought basil, a potted plant for the windowsill. I opened the guest room windows and let in the air. Cleaned out the closet, found my old scarf, the paisley silk, one Eliza once rolled her eyes at, and wore it to the market. The woman at the flower stall complimented it. You look radiant, she said. I hadn't been called that in years. At home, I went to the writing desk in the sunroom and pulled out a fresh note card. Not an email, not a text. A proper card with cream paper and a fountain pen I hadn't used since my husband's funeral. Dear Margot, I wrote. I don't know when you'll read this, but I want you to know something you matter. Not for what you do, not for who you impress, but for who you are. The way you always remembered my birthday without being reminded. The time you called just to say hi. That was enough. That will always be enough. I've set something aside for you not to control your future, but to remind you that someone believed in it. Love always. Grandma. I folded the letter and placed it in an envelope marked, simply, for later. Then I went to the mantel where Eliza's wedding photo had been the one she sent post-ceremony with a caption, for your collection. I replaced it with a photo of me and Margot on the Ferris wheel, both of us holding melting cones and laughing. My hair was wild from the wind. Her eyes were crinkled with joy. No filter, no posing. Just two people who liked each other exactly as they were. The letter came on a Tuesday, tucked between a catalog I hadn't subscribed to and a flyer for solar panels. I almost missed it. A plain white envelope, my name written in a young, uneven hand. No return address, no stamp with flowers or flags. Just one folded sheet of lined paper torn from a notebook. Grandma. Are you okay? I don't know what happened between you and Mom, but I miss you. I keep thinking about when we used to make chocolate chip pancakes on Saturdays. You always let me flip the first one, even if it got stuck. I hope you're all right. I love you. Margot. That was it. No questions about money, no mention of the wedding. Just the voice of a 12-year-old who hadn't yet learned how to filter her love through someone else's shame. I read it 3 times, then placed it on the kitchen table and sat down beside it like it might disappear if I turned away. I didn't cry. Not exactly. But something deep inside me shifted like a bruise exhaling. I pulled out a new note card. Cream paper again. The same neat script. Dear Margot. Yes, I'm all right. I've just needed some quiet to think. I remember the pancakes. I remember your laugh. I remember all of it. The first one still sticks sometimes. Come visit whenever you want. The door is open. The griddle is ready. And I bought chocolate chips yesterday just in case. Love always. Grandma. I placed the card in a pale blue envelope and walked it to the post box. Raised the red flag. The wind caught at my scarf as I turned back toward the house. Inside, everything looked just as I'd left it. My teacup, my book. Margot's letter, open like a window. That afternoon, I cleaned the guest room, the same one Eliza always said was a little too much like an antique store. I changed the sheets, not the sleek gray set Eliza had chosen, but the floral ones Margot loved when she was younger, the ones that smelled like old soap and sunshine. I fluffed the pillows, opened the windows, and set a little book of fairy tales on the nightstand. Just in case. That evening, I made pancakes. Chocolate chip. Just one, a little misshapen golden at the edges. I set it on a plate beside Margot's letter, as if to say, see, I still remember how to be someone's home. I didn't check the driveway. I didn't watch the phone. I just left the lamp on in the guest room because sometimes love isn't a declaration. Sometimes it's a porch light left glowing in case someone finds their way back. She didn't call. She didn't text. She just showed up. It was Saturday, just after 2:00. The sun was soft through the maple trees, and I was folding laundry in the den when I heard the knock. Not urgent, not tentative, just present. Like a question asked with hope, not demand. I opened the door, and there she was, Margot. Backpack slung over one shoulder jacket zipped to her chin hair, a bit messier than her mother ever allowed. She looked up at me with that half smile I knew from age 5, when she'd get caught sneaking extra syrup and try to charm her way out of consequence. I came for pancakes, she said. I stepped aside. Then we better make sure the griddle's hot. She didn't run into my arms, didn't cry, just walked in like she'd never left, dropped her bag beside the hall table, and wandered straight into the kitchen. That was always the thing about Margot. She never waited for permission to belong. The mixing bowls were already out. She noticed. You weren't sure, huh? I had a feeling, I said. She grinned. I still get the first flip right. Only if you don't burn it. Deal. We didn't talk about Eliza. Not at first. We measured flour. Cracked eggs. She licked the spoon and made a face when she got a chunk of baking soda. I handed her a glass of water and tried not to laugh. After we ate, she curled up on the armchair with one of the old fairy tale books. The same one she used to make me read again and again, always skipping the sad parts. She didn't ask for a screen, didn't ask for Wi-Fi. Just turned pages slowly, toes tucked under her. It wasn't until late afternoon when we were sipping cocoa on the back porch that she asked very softly, "Are you mad at Mom?" I stirred my cup. No. She looked up at me skeptical. "I'm not angry," I said again. "I'm disappointed. There's a difference." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said you were being unfair, that you shut her out. I nodded. I did, but not out of revenge. Then why I took a breath. Because I spent too long being asked to stay quiet in my own life. And at some point, it stopped being patience and started being erasure. She stared at her mug. Then with a frown deeper than a 12-year-old should carry, Mom gets mad when I ask questions. I reached out, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You don't need to be afraid to ask me anything. Another silence. Then I don't think she means to be mean. I think she just forgets people aren't furniture. I blinked. The phrasing, so simple, so exact. I leaned over and kissed her temple. I think you're braver than both of us combined. She smiled again, a real one this time. No borrowed posture, no half-posed emotion. Just Margot, whole. It wasn't Margot who told her. But somehow mothers always know when the balance has shifted. The next Thursday, Eliza appeared on my porch. She wore a coat that cost more than my refrigerator and clutched a grocery bag like it might qualify as an apology. Inside chamomile tea, a lemon tart from that overpriced bakery she used to mock, and a gardening magazine with a sticky note. Thought you'd like the spring layout. She didn't smile when I opened the door, just said, "Hi, Mom." I didn't step back. Didn't open wider. "Why are you here? I wanted to see the house," she said. "You know what it looks like." I didn't mean the walls. I let her in. She glanced around, taking in the changed photos, the open windows, the old scarf hanging from the coat hook. Her gaze landed on the embroidery Margot had made me last month, framed above the kitchen threshold. "Home is where your voice matters." "You changed things," she murmured. I finally made space, I said. We sat at the kitchen table. She didn't touch the tart. I didn't expect Margot to keep coming. "Because you didn't think I had anything left to offer. That's not fair, but it's true." She looked down. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "You stopped helping," she said after a pause. "No," I said gently. "I stopped enabling." Her breath caught. I was overwhelmed. "You always understood." "I did," I nodded. "For years. But then you left me out of a wedding I paid for. You let someone caption a photo just family while I stood outside. That's not confusion, Eliza. That's cowardice." She swallowed. I didn't know how to fix it. "So you left it for me to carry." There was no anger in my voice, just fatigue. The kind that comes from carrying things too long. "I'm sorry," she said. Barely a whisper. "I didn't know I was hurting you." I tilted my head. "That's the part that hurts the most." We sat in silence. Then I added, "You're not too late." but you'll have to start from the beginning." She looked up. Not with Margot. Not with Tom. With me. Her lips parted like she might argue. But then she just nodded. "You're welcome to visit," I said. "But not to stay. Not yet." She gathered her things. At the door, she turned. "Margot loves you." "I know," I said. "Because she still sees me." I closed the door behind her. Not a slam, just a full, measured click. That night, the house hummed with quiet, not absence, not tension, just earned peace. I made stew, read a few pages, watered the basil, sat on the porch while the sun went down. And as the light stretched long across the floorboards, I realized this was not the end of anything. This was the beginning of a life I had postponed too long. A life where I didn't have to be needed to be seen, where I didn't have to be useful to be loved, where silence wasn't punishment. It was a room I built for myself with windows and books and recipes that no longer waited on guests to be valid. A few days later, I planted bulbs in the front yard: tulips, daffodils, crocuses, things that bloom at different times, things that don't rush to prove themselves, things that return in their own season, resilient, uninvited, unstoppable. Just like me. And if you're still reading this, if you've ever felt yourself shrinking to fit a role someone handed you long ago, maybe this is your season too. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to stay where love only flows in one direction. And you don't need anyone's permission to come home to yourself. Stand up. Dust off the apron. Light the porch lamp. Make something warm, even if it's just for one. You were never just the background. You are and have always been the story. If this story found you at the right time, leave a comment, even just a word, to remind someone else they're not alone. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, quiet, fierce, and true, you're welcome to follow along. Here, your voice matters too.